Robert stood near the buffet table, clutching a mug of mulled wine like it was a lifeline. His confident exterior, honed through years in marketing, belied the reluctance that churned within. He hadn't wanted to come. Yet here he was, trapped by holiday tradition and an overly enthusiastic party host who'd insisted everyone in their circle attend. The festive decor, though dazzling, did little to quell the rising tension in his chest. Twinkling lights and garlands wrapped every beam and banister, while a towering Christmas tree glittered in the center of the room, its ornaments reflecting the golden glow of the chandelier. But none of this beauty could distract Robert from the sharp reality of his situation. He knew Randy would be here. Randy, the ever-suave lawyer with his effortless charm and a knack for turning every professional encounter into a battleground. Their rivalry had become legendary in their shared social circles. Randy's smirks, always a little too knowing, and his uncanny ability to outmaneuver Robert in debates had fueled countless sleepless nights. It wasn't hatred, exactly. It was something deeper, more irritating, and infinitely harder to define. Robert took a slow sip of his wine, scanning the room. He told himself he wasn't looking for Randy, but his gaze betrayed him, flickering toward the door with every new arrival. He'd rehearsed the evening in his mind, polite hellos, strategic mingling, and a quiet escape before midnight. No confrontations, no games. Just a peaceful evening spent basking in the glow of holiday spirit, if such a thing were even possible with Randy present. And then, as if summoned by the mere thought, the lodge's heavy wooden door creaked open, allowing a gust of icy wine to sweep inside. Standing in its wake, brushing snow from his tailored coat, was Randy. Tall, composed, and devastatingly self-assured, he surveyed the room with the ease of someone who knew he belonged. His dark eyes locked briefly with Robert's, and a slow, almost imperceptible smile curved his lips. Robert's stomach sank. Here we go, he thought. Whatever plans he'd made to avoid Randy were already unraveling. Still, he squared his shoulders, determination flickering like a stubborn ember. Tonight wasn't about Randy. Tonight was about surviving the party, enjoying the ambience, and leaving with his dignity intact. But as Randy began to weave through the crowd, exchanging greetings and laughter like courtesy, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that survival might not be so simple. Randy's arrival was nothing short of theatrical. His entrance commanded attention, drawing every eye in the room, as if he'd orchestrated the moment. With a charming laugh and a quick quip to the host, he became the center of gravity, his presence magnetic. Robert tried to stay out of the orbit but failed when Randy approached with a glass of champagne in hand. "Robert," Randy said smoothly, his tone carrying that familiar edge of amusement. "Didn't expect to see you here. Trying to outshine the Christmas tree, are we?" Robert arched an eyebrow, taking a deliberate sip of his wine before replying. "And you're here to audition for Santa's replacement, I assume." Their exchange drew a few laughs from nearby guests, but the words, though sharp, lacked real malice. It was their usual rhythm, a dance of barbs that felt strangely comfortable despite its edge. Randy lingered for a moment longer, his gaze holding Robert's with an intensity that was hard to ignore, before being swept away by another conversation. Just as Robert began to breathe easier, the party host clapped her hands, calling for everyone's attention. "Time for a little fun," she announced, her grin wide. "We're doing a Secret Santa trivia game. Pairing up is mandatory, and names are already drawn." Robert's stomach flipped when his name was called alongside Randy's. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd, as if the pairing were some inside joke. Randy's expression was unreadable as he made his way over, but the corners of his mouth twitched like he was holding back a smile. The game began with light-hearted questions about holiday traditions, interspersed with moments of awkward collaboration. Despite Robert's initial irritation, he couldn't help noticing the unexpected. Randy was thoughtful in ways Robert hadn't anticipated. He'd lean in, lowering his voice to suggest an answer, his tone devoid of arrogance. At one point, when Robert stumbled over a tricky question, Randy subtly redirected the host's attention, sparing Robert from embarrassment. Their banter softened, evolving into something less combative and more companionable. Robert found himself laughing at Randy's dry humor, caught off guard by the warmth that occasionally flickered through his rival's polished exterior. By the end of the game, their team had won, and the applause felt oddly personal, as if the victory signaled something more than a simple contest. As the crowd dispersed, Robert glanced at Randy, unsure of what to say. The lawyer's usual smirk was gone. replaced by a quieter expression that Robert couldn't quite read. Whatever it was, it made his chest tighten, the evening's tension shifting into something altogether different. The lodge's cozy ambience was abruptly interrupted by darkness. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the lights flickered once before surrendering to the power outage. Outside, the storm howled with renewed vigor, rattling the windows as if testing their resilience. In the chaos, Robert's practical side took over. He grabbed a flashlight from the nearest shelf and began distributing candles to the bewildered guests. Randy appeared at his side, calm and composed, assisting without hesitation. "Looks like we're on candle duty," Randy remarked, his tone light despite the circumstances. Together, they maneuvered through the darkened lodge, placing candles on tables and windowsills. The warm glow slowly returned to the room, casting long shadows that danced against the walls. Their teamwork drew appreciative nods, though Robert barely noticed. His focus was split between the task at hand and the quiet moments of connection forming between them. "The balcony needs clearing," Robert muttered, nodding toward the glass doors obscured by a layer of snow. Randy followed without question, grabbing a broom as they stepped into the biting cold. The wind stung their faces, but the work was straightforward. However, as they moved to re-enter the lodge, the door refused to budge. Panic flickered in Robert's chest as he jiggled the handle, realizing it had jammed from the inside. They were alone, trapped on the balcony with the storm swirling around them. "Well, this is inconvenient," Randy quipped, leaning against the railing. Robert shot him a glare, though it lacked real venom. "Glad you're amused." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the wind. Randy's playful demeanor faded as he spoke, his voice quieter. "You know, I've always admired you." Robert blinked, caught off guard. "What?" Randy exhaled, his breath visible in the frosty air. "The rivalry, the banter, it's just been an excuse. You're determined, creative, and impossible to ignore. Watching you has been inspiring and frustrating, because every time I tried to get closer, I didn't know how to do it without making it competitive." Robert stared, the words sinking in slowly. He searched Randy's face for any sign of insincerity but found none. The vulnerability there was undeniable, and it made something in Robert's chest ache. "I don't know what to say," Robert admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say anything," Randy replied. "Just know that it's true." The storm seemed quieter for a moment, the world shrinking to just the two of them and the fragile, unexpected honesty between them. Robert's fingers brushed the railing, his pulse quickening as he glanced toward Randy. Whatever walls had stood between them felt thinner now, their rivalry dissolving into something far more complicated. The balcony door creaked open, a flurry of apologies spilling from the partygoers who had finally managed to unjam it. Robert stepped back inside, the warmth hitting him like a wave. But before he could fully reorient himself, Randy's voice rang out, halting him mid-step. "Wait," Randy called, the room falling silent. He moved to the center of the lodge, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, ornately wrapped box. Robert's heart raced as Randy turned back to him, dropping to one knee with an ease that silenced every murmur. "Robert," Randy began, his tone steady but laced with emotion. "I've spent too long pretending this was just rivalry. The truth is, you challenge me, you make me better. And somewhere along the way, that turned into something I can't ignore." Mine raced, the whirlwind of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He glanced around the room, seeing the expectant faces of the guests, but his gaze inevitably returned to Randy. The vulnerability in his rivals, no, his admirer's eyes, was unmistakable. Time seemed to freeze, and then Robert took a deep breath. "Yes," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of feelings coursing through him. "Yes, Randy." A moment of stunned silence passed before the room erupted into cheers and applause. The tension melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of warmth and joy. Randy stood, slipping the ring onto Robert's finger with a smile so genuine it made Robert's chest tighten. The sound of clinking glasses and jubilant laughter filled the air as the guests celebrated the unexpected union. As if orchestrated by fate, the snowstorm outside began to subside. The heavy wind softened to a gentle breeze, and the first rays of moonlight pierced through the thinning clouds. The lodge, now aglow with candlelight and festive decor, seemed brighter and cozier than ever. Underneath the mistletoe that hung in the doorway, Randy hesitated for only a moment before leaning in. The kiss was tender, a promise of new beginnings and a connection forged through rivalry and understanding. The room erupted in another round of cheers, but Robert barely noticed. All he could feel was Randy's warmth, the world narrowing to just the two of them in that moment. The party resumed, the guests toasting and laughing as the night carried on. Outside, snowflakes began to fall again, this time in a peaceful, lazy drift that blanketed the landscape in shimmering white. The lodge stood as a beacon of warmth in the snowy wilderness, its windows glowing with the light of celebration and newfound love. From a distance, the scene was picture-perfect, a cozy lodge surrounded by snow, filled with the sounds of joy and the sight of two men who had finally found each other. The rivalry that once defined them was gone, replaced by something far more enduring. And as the night deepened, it was clear that this Christmas would be the start of something truly magical. Between you and your gay partner, who is likely to propose first? Share your comments below and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We are Pride Stories Unfiltered, your #1 pride.